Ryland had worked as a mechanic for most of his life, and he liked to say that machines were easier to understand than people. Out on the frontier, where the nearest big city was many hours away, his job was simple. He repaired broken engines, patched up cargo haulers, and kept the outpost running even on the worst days. But the morning the storm ended, something felt different in the air. The sky was still dark from the night, and the ground was wet from the strange electric rain that came with alien storms. When he stepped outside, he smelled smoke. Not the usual smoke from generators or cooking fires, but sharp, burning metal. That smell always meant only one thing out here: something had crashed. Raylan grabbed his pack of tools, checked that his breathing mask was working, and started walking toward the edge of the outpost. Most people stayed indoors after storms because they were unpredictable. But Rylan had always been the type to go toward danger if it meant someone might need help, even if that someone was a machine he had never seen before. As he followed, the smoke trail rising into the sky, the wind carried strange sparks across the air. The storm was fading, but not fully gone. He kept going, one steady step after another, until he reached the canyon where most crashes happened. The sight in front of him made him stop for a moment. What used to be a quiet rocky slope was now filled with pieces of a ship he had never seen before. The hull was a smooth silver blue, glowing faintly like it still remembered the storm. Panels were torn off, wires hanging like vines, and large sections were still smoking. He looked around carefully, listening for any sound that might tell him if someone survived. Usually he found damaged drones or broken cargo pods, but this ship was different. There was no mark, no symbol, nothing he recognized. He took a few steps closer and felt the ground vibrate under his boots. It could have been leftover energy from the storm, or the ship's power system trying to turn back on, or maybe something moving inside. He paused and waited. At first there was silence. Then he heard something, a soft, low sound, almost like a whimper. It made the hairs on his neck stand up. It didn't sound like a machine. It sounded alive. Rylan exhaled slowly, reminding himself not to jump to conclusions. Many alien ships used organic-like parts that could make strange noises, but this sound felt different. It carried stress, pain, and fear. He climbed over a broken wing panel and moved toward a narrow gap between two large pieces of metal. Smoke drifted out from the gap, warm and sharp. He crouched down and peered inside, expecting to see some failing engine unit or damaged support structure. Instead, two faint lights blinked back at him. At first he thought they were reflections, but then they moved, slowly, with intention. And along with them came another sound, a weak rumble, almost like a growl, but too soft to be threatening. His heart jumped. He lowered himself closer to get a better look without frightening whatever was inside. When his eyes adjusted to the dim light, he finally saw it. A creature lay trapped between twisted metal, its body curled awkwardly. It was small, no bigger than a large dog, but clearly not from any world he knew. Smooth scales covered its body, faintly shimmering with colors that changed with the smoke. Its wings were folded tight and pressed against the wreckage, and one of them twitched slightly, like it hurt too much to move. Its long tail was half hidden under debris, and its breathing was shallow but steady. The creature looked like a young dragon from old stories, though softer, almost gentle in appearance. Rylan felt his breath catch. The creature wasn't just alive, it was injured and scared. He took a slow step forward, but the creature let out a faint warning sound. Not loud, not dangerous, more like it was trying to say it didn't want to be hurt again. Rylan raised his hands slowly to show he meant no harm. "It's okay," he said softly, though he knew the creature couldn't understand his words. Sometimes tone mattered more than the language. The dragon-like creature blinked again, its eyes dim but alert. It didn't try to bite or pull away. It only watched him carefully, as if trying to judge whether he was a threat or a friend. Rylan had helped many wild animals in the past, ones hurt by storms or accidents. They all behaved the same way, at first fearful, but hopeful. Carefully, he placed his hand on the metal beside the creature, testing its temperature. It was still warm from the crash, but not dangerously hot. He slowly cleared away small pieces of debris, making sure not to move anything that might collapse on the creature. Each piece he removed made the creature flinch, but it didn't try to fight him. It almost seemed like it understood he was helping. Smoke curled around him, making him cough, but he kept working. Every now and then, he glanced at the creature to make sure it was still conscious. It watched him with wide, tired eyes, and he felt something inside him shift. This wasn't just another job. Something about the creature felt important, like fate had put it in his path for a reason. A sharp, metallic creak echoed overhead, and he looked up quickly. A heavy support beam above them was loose, barely hanging on. If it fell, it would crush the creature entirely. He needed to act fast. He moved closer to the beam and examined it, knowing he had only a few seconds to decide what to do. With no time to think, he grabbed the beam with both hands and pushed it upward with all his strength. It was heavier than anything he had lifted before, and for a moment he felt his arm shake. But he didn't let go. The creature seemed to sense the danger too. It let out a weak, trembling sound. Rylan forced his body to move, using all his remaining strength to shift the beam slightly to the side. When it finally slid off and fell harmlessly onto another piece of wreckage, he collapsed to one knee, breathing hard. But the creature was safe. He turned toward it, and for the first time, the creature made a small movement toward him. Not much, just a tiny lean, like a nod of gratitude. The gesture was so unexpected, it made him smile. Even through the exhaustion and smoke, he spoke softly again, trying to comfort it. "I know you're hurt. I'll get you out of here." Carefully, he reached toward the creature, letting it sniff. His hand first. The creature's nose was warm and smooth, and it made a soft sound, almost like acceptance. His heart tightened. He placed his hands gently under its body, avoiding the injured parts. It was lighter than he expected, though still warm and shaking. As he lifted it, the creature pressed its head against his arm, trusting him completely. Path out of the wreckage wasn't easy. Loose metal, small fires, and shifting debris made each step dangerous. Rylan moved slowly, protecting the creature with his body whenever something fell or sparked. The smoke made it hard to see, but he kept going. The creature stayed quiet in his arms, breathing weakly, but staying awake, as if it didn't want to lose sight of him. When Rylan finally stepped out of the crash site and into the open air, he let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The wind felt cool on his skin, clearing the smoke from his lungs. The creature blinked up at the sky, then at him, its eyes looking clearer now that it was out of danger. Rylan looked down at the creature and felt a strange warmth in his chest. He had saved many things in his life machines, animals, even people, but nothing felt like this. He didn't know why, but he felt connected to the creature, as if they had shared something important in those few minutes inside the wreckage. He carried the creature back toward the outpost, unsure of what would happen next. But he knew one thing. He couldn't leave it alone. Not after seeing the fear in its eyes. Not after feeling it trust him in its weakest moment. Whatever this creature was, whoever it belonged to, he would make sure it had a chance to live. As he walked through the fading stormlight, the creature rested against him peacefully. It didn't know his name. It didn't know where it was. But it knew one thing: this human had saved it when everything else had tried to destroy it. And somewhere deep inside, even though neither of them realized it yet, Something unbreakable had begun. Ryland didn't waste a second once he stepped out of the wreckage with the small, dragon-like creature in his arms. The storm clouds above him were breaking apart, letting in faint strips of light that made the creature's scales shimmer weakly. Its breathing was still shallow, and every few minutes its body twitched from pain. Ryland tightened his grip just enough to keep it steady without hurting it. The outpost wasn't far, but every step felt slow because he didn't want to jostle the creature or make its injuries worse. He moved carefully across the uneven ground, stepping around cracks and small rocks left by the storm. The creature tried to lift its head once, but it didn't have the strength to keep it up for long. It rested its head against his chest instead, almost as if it trusted him completely now that he had carried it out from danger. Ryland could feel the faint warmth of its body through his clothes, mixed with a shaky rhythm that told him it was still fighting to stay awake. "You're going to be okay," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if he was trying to convince the creature or himself. When he reached the outpost gate, the two guards on duty froze, staring at him wide-eyed. One of them stepped forward, as if not sure whether to help or sound an alarm. Ryland shook his head quickly. "Not dangerous," he said, keeping his voice firm but calm. "It's injured. I need to get it inside." Neither guard argued. They stepped aside, still staring at the strange creature in his arms. Ryland walked past them and headed straight for his workshop. It was the only place in the outpost with enough tools, equipment, and peace for him to focus. Once inside, he gently placed the creature on a padded workbench where he usually repaired delicate machinery. Today, the machine was a living being. The creature let out a soft, trembling sound as soon as its body touched the surface. Ryland gently placed his hand on its head, stroking it slowly to calm it down. Even though it was an alien creature, the gesture worked. Its eyes softened, and it stopped shaking for a moment. "Good," he murmured. "Just stay with me. I'll fix what I can." He had no medical training beyond basic first aid, but years of repairing machines had taught him a lot about structure, pressure, and how to work gently with delicate parts. He grabbed a small scanner, usually used for checking damaged circuits, and ran it carefully over the creature's body. The screen flashed different colors, giving him some idea of where the injuries were. He saw cracks along the wing joints, bruising across its side, and some cuts that needed cleaning. He stepped away for a moment to prepare water, clean cloth, and a mild healing gel used for soothing burns. When he returned, the creature lifted, its head weakly, as if scared he would leave again. Ryland stayed close. "Easy," he said softly. "I'm not going anywhere." He began by cleaning the cuts carefully. The creature flinched sometimes, but never snapped or growled. Instead, it watched him closely, its eyes following every move. Whenever he had to touch a sore spot, the creature pressed its claws gently against the edge of the workbench, holding itself steady so he could continue. The trust it showed surprised him. Ryland worked slowly, speaking softly to it, even though he knew it couldn't understand his words. It helped him focus, and maybe it comforted the creature too. When he applied the soothing gel, the creature relaxed visibly, letting out a quiet breath that sounded almost like relief. Then came the wings. These worried him the most. One was bent at an unnatural angle, and the other was swollen. He reached toward the damaged wing, and the creature tensed, letting out a low sound that told him it hurt a lot. He paused and placed his hand gently on its head. "I know," he whispered, "but I need to check it." The creature stayed still, though its claws scraped softly against the metal table from the effort. Ryland examined the joints carefully, making sure not to force anything. The wing wasn't broken completely, but some parts were strained and needed support. He created a small brace using flexible metal strips and soft padding, then secured. it gently around the wing to stabilize it. The creature's breathing grew slow and steady again. Its eyes drooped, fighting sleep. Ryland knew he had done what he could for now. He went to grab a small blanket and placed it loosely over the creature to keep it warm. It shifted slightly under the fabric, curling into a more comfortable position. Then its eyes slowly closed. Its breathing finally settled into a peaceful rhythm. It had fallen asleep. Ryland sat beside the workbench, feeling the weight of the last hour settle on his shoulders. His arms were sore from lifting the heavy debris. His lungs still burned faintly from the smoke he had inhaled. But none of that mattered. He kept watching the creature, making sure its chest continued to rise and fall. After a few minutes, someone knocked on the workshop door. Ryland looked up to see one of the guards enter quietly. "Is it dangerous?" The guard whispered. "No," Ryland said firmly. "Just scared and injured." The guard peered at the creature from a distance, then nodded slowly. "If it wakes, will it panic?" "Maybe," Ryland admitted. "But I don't think it will hurt anyone unless it feels threatened." The guard accepted that and left, closing the door behind him. Ryland turned back to the creature. He could finally study it properly now that it wasn't covered in smoke and debris. Its scales glowed faintly, like soft light moving underwater. Its wings, though damaged, looked designed for graceful flight. Its tail twitched gently as it slept, curling closer to its body. It looked peaceful almost, like a young animal that had gone through far too much in too little time. He wondered where it had come from. The ship had no markings. The design was unfamiliar, and the creature itself was unlike anything documented in the outpost's records. Someone somewhere must be looking for it, and if not, then what had brought it here? As he sat silently, the creature shifted again, letting out a soft rumble. It sounded almost like it was dreaming or remembering the crash. Ryland leaned forward, making sure the brace on its wings stayed secure. The creature didn't wake. Instead, it stretched slightly and pulled the blanket closer with its claws. The movement made Ryland smile without realizing it. He stayed near the workbench for a long time, listening to the faint hum of his workshop machines. Every now and then he checked the creature's breathing or the temperature of its body to make sure it wasn't getting cold. The storm outside faded completely, leaving behind a quiet calm. Hours passed, but Ryland didn't feel restless. The creature's presence filled the room with a strange warmth, something gentle and alive. He felt protective over it, more than he had expected. Saving it had been a quick decision, but now that it was safe, he realized how close it had been to dying in that wreckage. The creature finally stirred awake after some time. Its eyes opened slowly, blinking as if confused by the warm light of Vaya. The workshop. When it saw Ryland sitting beside it, it didn't panic. Instead, it made a soft sound, something between a sigh and a welcoming rumble. Ryland rose from his chair and approached carefully. "Feeling a little better?" he asked softly. The creature lifted its head weakly and nudged his hand with its nose. The gesture was unexpected and gentle. It wasn't just trust, it was gratitude. Ryland felt his chest tighten warmly. He stroked its head carefully, avoiding the sore spots. The creature leaned into his touch, closing its eyes again, as if comforted by the simple contact. "You're safe now," he whispered. "I promise." The creature settled back down, no longer shaking, no longer frightened. It knew he wouldn't leave. Ryland didn't know what the next hours would bring, or what would happen once the outpost officers heard about the crash. All he knew was that he had found a creature that shouldn't have survived, and yet it had trusted him enough to let him help. He sat down again beside it, staying close as the creature drifted in and out of sleep, its breathing steady, its body slowly recovering. Neither of them realized it yet, But something powerful had begun in that workshop. Something that would return years later in a way neither could imagine. Days passed, and the small alien creature stayed in Ryland's workshop. At first, he had worried it would try to escape or lash out in fear, but it didn't. It had begun to trust him completely. He noticed small changes each day. Its breathing grew steadier, its movements more controlled, and it began to open its eyes wider, taking in the world around it. Sometimes it would tilt its head, as if trying to understand something new, like the strange machines, wires, and tools that filled the workshop. Ryland spent his days tending to the creature's wounds, making sure the wing brace stayed in place, and applying the soothing gel to the cuts. He often talked to it as he worked, even though he wasn't sure it understood. He found that speaking softly helped both of them. The creature's eyes seemed to follow him with recognition, and on some days it even made small chirping sounds that seemed like attempts to respond. He had no idea how long it had been alive before the crash or what it had gone through, but he knew one thing: whatever danger it had faced had left it cautious and wary. He wanted to make sure it felt safe. That meant keeping the workshop warm, quiet, and free from anything that might startle it. He rearranged his tools so there were no sharp edges sticking out, covered machines that made sudden noises, and even moved some heavy equipment to make more open space for the creature to stretch its wings. When it was ready. By the fourth day, the creature began to attempt small movements. It lifted its head higher than before, flexed its tail slowly, and stretched one wing just enough to feel the air. Each time it did, Ryland was there to support it, gently lifting the limb or stabilizing it so it wouldn't fall or get hurt again. When the creature first flapped that damaged wing slightly, Ryland couldn't help smiling. It was a tiny movement, almost unnoticeable, but it felt like a huge victory. He started giving it small bits of food, too. At first, the creature hesitated, sniffing and watching him carefully, but hunger eventually won. He offered pieces of soft protein and water in shallow dishes. The creature licked the water carefully and nibbled the food slowly. Each bite seemed like a small triumph, a sign that it was regaining strength. Ryland watched it closely, noting every small improvement. He made careful records, writing in a notebook when it ate, how it moved, and any changes he noticed. During this time, a strange bond began to form. It wasn't like the bond people often described with pets, but it was close. The creature would follow his movements with its eyes, lean toward him when he spoke, and even make soft, happy sounds when he gently touched it. Ryland began to feel a protective instinct he had never felt before. He had always been responsible for machines, but this was different. This was life, fragile and strange, yet trusting him completely. Sometimes the creature would watch him for long minutes without moving, as if it were trying to understand him. Ryland would glance back and offer a small smile. In those moments, the workshop felt like a quiet, secret world of their own, removed from the chaos of the frontier. No one else could understand the connection they were forming. He was a mechanic, yes, but he felt like a guardian. And the creature seemed to feel that too. As the days turned into weeks, the creature grew more comfortable. It learned to trust the brace on its wing, moving carefully around the workshop without tipping over or flinching at sudden noises. Ryland taught it simple gestures, lifting a paw or nudging an object with its snout, just to encourage interaction and movement. Each successful attempt brought him a quiet satisfaction he hadn't expected. It wasn't just healing. It was learning to survive again. The outpost staff were curious, of course. Some peeked through the windows, whispering and pointing. But Ryland insisted on privacy. This wasn't just an alien creature to him. It was something alive that deserved safety and respect. He refused to let anyone touch it without his supervision. The creature seemed to understand the rules too, rarely reacting to the occasional curious glance. Instead, it focused on him, following his movements with wide, intelligent eyes. One afternoon, a sudden alarm rang through the outpost. Rylan froze, instinctively shielding the creature with his body. The creature reacted instantly. Two, flaring its small wings slightly and letting out a low, protective rumble. The alarm turned out to be a false one. Some cargo had shifted and triggered sensors. But the reaction showed him just how aware and intelligent the creature had become. It wasn't just trusting him. It was beginning to recognize danger, just as he had. After the alarm, Rylan spent hours simply observing it. He noticed that it would lift its head when he spoke, cocking one ear-like fin toward him. It began to mimic small actions, like tilting its head when he tilted his own, or moving a paw when he reached for a tool. Rylan smiled quietly. The creature wasn't just recovering. It was learning, adapting, and forming a bond that went deeper than he could describe. He also started experimenting with gentle exercises to help its wings. Nothing strenuous, just lifting and lowering them while supporting the joints, encouraging blood flow and muscle recovery. At first, the creature was hesitant, but eventually it began to cooperate. Each small flap, each careful movement was a step toward strength. Rylan marked each improvement in his notebook, almost like a proud parent, though he had never imagined caring for a living being in this way. At night, he would stay in the workshop longer than usual, just to keep watch. The creature would curl up in a small corner of the padded table, its body relaxed but alert. He would sit nearby, sometimes reading manuals or cleaning tools, but mostly just watching it breathe, noticing the subtle rise and fall of its chest, the tiny movements of its tail, and the way it shifted slightly when he moved. There was comfort in their quiet routine. One evening, the creature did something unexpected. It lifted its head and nudged Rylan's hand with its snout. Then slowly, it pressed its small head against his chest, leaning into him as if seeking warmth or reassurance. Rylan froze for a moment. He had never seen a creature, alien or not, show such clear trust and affection. He stroked its head gently, whispering, "I've got you. You're safe now." From that night on, the creature became more responsive. It would move toward him when he entered the workshop, follow him around the room, and even playfully swat at small objects he offered. It had developed a quiet personality, curious, cautious, but also brave in small ways. Rylan found himself talking to it like a friend, sharing stories about the outpost, the frontier, and even small personal memories. The creature seemed to listen, tilting its head or making soft sounds at appropriate moments. Weeks turned into a month, and the creature was almost fully recovered. Its scales had regained a faint shimmer, its eyes were bright and alert, and it could flap its wings lightly without pain. Rylan could see the intelligence behind those eyes, the awareness of someone who had survived great danger and learned who it could trust. He began to realize that their bond wasn't just temporary. It had become something permanent, unspoken, but undeniable. One day, while he worked on repairing a small transport engine, the creature climbed onto a nearby table and watched intently. Whenever he made a small mistake or a tool slipped, it would emit a soft rumble, almost like a warning. Rylan laughed quietly. Yeah, I know. I'm not perfect," he said, even though the creature couldn't understand his words fully. But the tone mattered. It was part of the bond they shared, understanding without language. By the end of that month, Rylan realized he hadn't just saved a life. He had gained a companion, one that trusted him completely and had begun to see him as more than a helper. The creature's recovery was remarkable, and he felt proud, not because of skill, but because of the trust it had given him. That trust was rare, precious, and fragile, and he intended to protect it no matter what came next. As the sun set one evening, casting long golden streaks across the outpost. The creature leaned against him as he repaired the last piece of a damaged hover engine. It purred softly, a sound like low vibration, and Ryland felt a warmth spread through his chest. For the first time in a long while, the world outside didn't seem threatening. In that quiet workshop, surrounded by metal and machines, a human and a creature from another world had found understanding, trust, and the beginnings of a bond that would last far longer than anyone could imagine. They didn't speak the same language. They didn't even share the same species. But somehow, they had formed a connection that was deeper than words, a connection born of rescue, care, and shared moments of quiet recovery. Ryland had saved a life, but in the process, he realized that the creature was already changing his own. And neither of them knew yet that this bond, forged quietly in the safety of a small workshop, would one day grow into something that would save both of them in ways they could never predict. The peaceful days in the workshop didn't last forever. One afternoon, as the sun was bright over the outpost, strange ships appeared in the sky. At first, Ryland thought it might be a routine patrol, but as they descended closer, he could see markings he had never seen before. They weren't hostile at first glance, but they carried an air of authority and purpose that made him uneasy. He stopped what he was doing, glancing at the small creature that had now grown noticeably stronger. It noticed the change in his tension. Immediately, lifting its head and letting out a soft, questioning rumble, Ryland shook his head gently. "It's okay. Stay calm," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if he could convince himself as easily as him. He had grown used to being in control here, keeping machines running, and now caring for this creature, but he had never faced anything like this. The ships landed carefully on the open ground outside the workshop, and figures stepped down. They were tall with smooth, shining uniforms and a presence that demanded respect. One of them approached the outpost entrance, speaking through a device that translated its voice into the local language. "We are looking for a rare creature," it said. "It is important to our people. Please surrender it for safety." Raylan's heart sank. He knew immediately that they were referring to the dragon-like creature he had rescued. He glanced at it quickly. It had noticed the newcomers too. Its tail flicked anxiously, and it let out a soft growl that sounded more like worry than threat. Its body tensed slightly, pressing against the edge of the workbench where it often rested. "I can't just give it to you," Ryland said firmly, stepping in front of the creature. "It's safe here. It's injured. I'm taking care of it." The envoy tilted its head, seemingly understanding, but its voice carried no anger, only certainty. "It cannot remain here. Its species is endangered. It is safer with us." Rayland shook his head again. He had thought about this possibility before. If the creature had come from another world, someone might be searching for it. But he hadn't imagined it would happen so soon, and he certainly hadn't imagined it would feel so final. He had grown attached. The creature wasn't just an alien species to him. It had become a companion, a friend, and someone he had promised to protect. Creature seemed to sense the tension in the air. It lifted its head and hissed softly, curling slightly into Ryland's side. Its small wings twitched in warning, and it shifted to put itself slightly between Ryland and the newcomers. Ryland placed his hand gently on its head, reassuring it. "I know," he murmured. "I know they're here, but you're safe with me for now." The envoys stepped closer, carefully but firmly. They made no sudden moves, but the presence of so many observers made Ryland nervous. He could feel the creature's anxiety growing. It wasn't scared of the envoys. It had survived worse, but it could sense that something serious was happening. "You cannot keep it," one of the envoys said. "It is vital to our species. We only want its safety." Ryland knew the words were true in part. The creature might indeed be endangered, and these envoys might have good intentions. But he also knew that giving it up now would break the bond he had worked so hard to build. He couldn't just hand it over. "I saved it," he said firmly. "I don't care what species it is. I'm responsible for it. You don't get to take it from me." The envoys paused. One of them raised a hand, and the small creature's ears twitched. It pressed closer to Ryland's side. Ryland kept his hand on its head, feeling the warmth of its body and the steadying rhythm of its breathing. "I don't want to fight," he said, "and I'm not looking for trouble. But I can't let you take it from me right now. It's not ready to leave." The envoys looked at each other, communicating silently. They seemed frustrated, but didn't make any aggressive moves. One of them stepped forward slowly, pointing toward the workshop door. "It must come with us," it said. "It cannot remain here." The creature let out a low rumble that sounded almost like a warning. It shifted so that its wings stretched slightly, a subtle display of its readiness to defend itself if necessary. Ryland's heart skipped a beat. He had trained it to be calm and gentle, but he had never expected it to show such awareness or loyalty in a moment like this. "I can't let you take it," Ryland repeated. "It belongs with me until it's strong enough. That's the only way it can survive." The envoys looked at him, seemingly debating whether to push further. Ryland could feel the tension rising. He had always been careful, precise, and rational, but in this moment, it wasn't about logic. It was about trust, responsibility, and connection. The creature had survived because of him, and he refused to let anyone interfere with that. Creature made another low rumble, and this time it moved slightly forward, letting its small body press closer to Ryland. The gesture was clear. It was standing with him, ready to follow his lead. Ryland felt a surge of warmth and determination. He had promised to protect it, and he intended to keep that promise, no matter the odds. The envoys paused again, studying the creature and then looking at Ryland. For a moment, everything was still. The only sounds were the soft hum of machinery in the workshop and the faint breeze outside. The creature's eyes met Ryland's, and in that moment, he felt a silent understanding pass between them. It trusted him. It would follow him. Finally, one of the envoys sighed and stepped back. "We will return," it said quietly. "But know this, we will come back for it. It cannot remain here forever." Ryland nodded slowly, feeling a mixture of relief and apprehension. "I understand," he said, "but for now, it stays with me." The envoys departed, their ships rising silently into the sky. Once they were gone, Ryland exhaled, feeling the tension drain from his body. The creature stayed close, nuzzling against him as if seeking comfort. He stroked its head gently, whispering softly, "It's okay. You're safe. For now, I've got you." That night, Ryland stayed in the workshop longer than usual. He watched the creature curl up on the padded table, its small body relaxed but alert, listening for any sounds outside. He realized just how deep their bond had become. This wasn't just about healing or survival. It was about trust, loyalty, and connection. The creature had survived a crash, injuries, and strangers who wanted it for reasons beyond his understanding. Yet it had chosen to trust him, and that trust was sacred. He thought about the future. The envoys had warned him they would come back. Eventually, he might not be able to protect the creature from them. But he also knew that every day it stayed with him, it grew stronger. And the bond they shared would give him an advantage, something no one else could understand or break down in the quiet hours. He reflected on how much the creature had changed his life. He had always worked with machines, which were predictable and unfeeling. But this creature was alive, responsive, and capable of emotion. Caring for it had taught him patience, empathy, and responsibility in ways he had never imagined. The workshop, once a place of tools and metal, had become a sanctuary of life, trust, and mutual understanding. As the night deepened, Reland finally leaned back in his chair and allowed himself a small smile. The creature was asleep, its breathing steady, its small body rising and falling with gentle rhythm. Outside, the outpost was quiet, and the stars shone faintly in the clear sky. Reland whispered softly, almost to himself, "We'll face whatever comes together." The creature shifted slightly, as if acknowledging his words. Though it could not understand language fully, it understood trust, safety, and the unspoken promise between them. And in that silent understanding, Raylan knew one thing clearly. No matter what challenges the future might bring, they would face them together, bound by the bond forged in the crash, nurtured in recovery, and strengthened by trust. It was more than survival now. It was the beginning of something enduring. And neither of them realized yet just how far that bond would carry them in the years to come. Years had passed since the small dragon-like creature had first appeared in Ryland's life. It had grown bigger, stronger, and far more aware of the world around it. Its scales now shimmered with a faint metallic glow, reflecting the sun's rays in a way that made it seem almost alive with energy. Its wings were fully healed, able to stretch wide and catch the wind. Yet, despite its growing size and power, it had never left the outpost on its own. It stayed nearby, loyal and alert, watching over the place as if it understood the value of safety and the bond it shared with Ryland. Ryland had grown older, too. His hair had hints of gray at the temples, and his hands bore the marks of years working with machines and tools. Yet he still kept the same careful, deliberate habits that had once saved the creature's life. He maintained the outpost's engines, repaired cargo transports, and kept the settlement running smoothly. But he also had another responsibility now: the creature. He often referred to it silently as his companion, though he knew it understood the world in ways that went beyond words. One quiet morning, as the sun rose over the rocky plains, alarms blared across the outpost. Ryland froze, the quiet calm of the morning shattered by the urgent warning. Through the main window, he saw a group of hostile ships approaching. They were small, fast, and armed. Panic rippled through the outpost as people scrambled to defend themselves. Ryland's heart raced. He had faced dangers before, but nothing like this. The creature, now fully grown, sensed the danger immediately. It crouched low, its wings spread wide, tail lashing slightly as if preparing to move. Its eyes, sharp and intelligent, scanned the approaching ships. Raylan felt a rush of gratitude for its presence. He didn't have the weapons or the speed to face these attackers alone, but together they might stand a chance. Ryland ran toward the workshop, grabbing a few tools and devices that could help him signal the outpost defenses. The creature followed closely, moving with incredible speed and grace. Despite its large size, its presence was both comforting and powerful. As he reached the control panels, he realized the attackers were aiming for the central engines. If they succeeded, the outpost would be defenseless. He quickly activated alarms, hoping the automated defenses would delay the attackers. But even as he worked, he knew it wouldn't be enough. The enemy ships were too fast, and they were closing in. Rayland's mind raced. He needed a plan, and he needed one now. Then, from the sky above, a shadow passed over the outpost. Ryland looked up, and his breath caught in his throat. The creature, fully grown now, had leaped into the air. Its wings stretched wide, catching the morning sunlight, and it let out a deafening roar that echoed across the plains. The sound was powerful, almost shaking the ground beneath them. The attackers hesitated, surprised by the sudden appearance of something so massive and otherworldly. Rayland's heart pounded as he watched. The creature dived toward the attackers, weaving between their ships with incredible speed. Its claws struck the nearest ship, tearing through its hull, while its tail smashed another into the ground. Sparks flew as metal collided with metal, and the enemy ships began to scatter. The outpost defenders, inspired by the creature's sudden attack, rallied and fired their own weapons. Raylan stayed at the control panel, guiding the defenses and keeping track of the attackers. The creature moved with precision, protecting the outpost as if it had trained for this moment its entire life. Every time a ship came too close, it was there, blocking, striking, and intimidating. Raylan could hardly believe the transformation. The fragile creature he had rescued years ago was now a guardian, fierce and unwavering. The battle was intense but short. The attackers, unprepared for such a force and overwhelmed by the coordinated defense, eventually retreated. The outpost had sustained minor damage, but thanks to the creature, no one had been seriously hurt. Raylan exhaled deeply, his chest tight with relief. He moved outside to see the creature land gracefully on the rocky ground, its wings folding neatly against its back. It turned its eyes toward him, scanning quickly to make sure he was safe. Raylan approached cautiously, almost in disbelief. You saved them," he whispered, his voice shaking with emotion. The creature let out a low rumble, almost like an acknowledgement. It pressed its head slightly against his shoulder, as if to say, "I always will." The outpost people gathered around, staring at the creature with awe and wonder. Some whispered, others pointed, and a few approached cautiously, still unsure whether it was dangerous. Raylan held up a hand. "It's ours," he said firmly. "It's protecting us, just like I promised it protection when it was small." The creature seemed to understand, letting out another soft rumble, watching the humans without fear, but with quiet authority. It had grown into something magnificent, yet it retained the gentle loyalty that had formed in the early days when Raylan first carried it from the wreckage. Raylan thought about the journey that had brought them here. From the moment he had found it trapped under twisted metal and smoke, he had cared for it with patience and persistence. He had spent countless hours tending to its injuries, feeding it, and teaching it how to trust again. The bond they had formed was unspoken, yet incredibly strong. And now, in the midst of danger, that bond had saved the lives of everyone in the outpost dot. As the day settled into evening, Raylan and the creature stood together, watching the sunset. The enemy ships had disappeared over the horizon, and the outpost was calm once more. People moved cautiously, checking for damage and thanking Raylan silently, though they also stared at the creature with a mixture of fear and admiration. The creature nudged Raylan gently with its snout, as if to remind him that it had been by his side through the entire battle. He knelt down, running his hand along its head and neck. "You were amazing today," he said softly. "I don't think anyone here realizes just how incredible you are." It responded with a low, happy rumble, pressing closer to him. For a moment, the world outside the workshop didn't matter. The battle was over, and they were safe together. The creature had grown into more than a survivor. It had become a protector, fierce and intelligent, yet loyal to the one who had saved it years ago. That night, as the outpost settled into quiet again, Raylan sat in the workshop, watching the creature curl up beside him. Its body, now strong and capable, still seemed to relax fully only in his presence. He thought about the future, about the envoys who might return, about the unpredictable dangers of the frontier. But he also knew one thing for certain. Whatever threats might come, they would face them together. The creature had chosen him, once when it had been weak and injured. And now, in its full strength, it had chosen him again, this time as its companion, its charge, and the one it would protect above all else. Raylan smiled quietly, feeling a deep sense of connection he had never imagined possible. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was loyalty, understanding, and the kind of bond that could not be broken by time, distance, or danger. Outside the workshop, the night sky was clear, filled with stars. The outpost was safe for now, but Ryland knew the world beyond was vast and unpredictable. Yet, with the creature at his side, he felt ready for anything. Together, they had survived the storm, recovered from injury, and faced danger. Together, they had formed a connection that went beyond words, species, or worlds. And in that quiet night, with the creature resting near him, Ryland knew that whatever came next, they would face it side by side. The years of trust, care, and shared experiences had prepared them for more than just survival. They had prepared them for a life of partnership, courage, and unbreakable loyalty. The creature shifted slightly, leaning into his shoulder once more, and Ryland whispered softly, "We've come a long way, haven't we?" It responded with a low rumble, gentle and affirming, and for a moment, the world felt perfectly right. They had both grown, both changed, and both had learned the meaning of trust in its purest form. And as the night deepened, Ryland realized that the protector he had once saved had now become the guardian of his own life, and nothing would ever change that.